Our daily Bible reading for February 27th. Our reading today comes from the Gospel of Mark chapter 7. Mark chapter 7, we'll begin reading in verse 1. Now when the Pharisees gathered to him with some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem, they saw that some of his disciples ate with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands properly, holding to the tradition of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And there are many other traditions that they observe, such as the washing of cups and pots and copper vessels and dining couches. And the Pharisees and scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?" And he said to them, "Well did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites, as it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men.' You leave the commandment of God and hold to the tradition of men." And he said to them, "You have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of God in order to establish your tradition. For Moses said, 'Honor your father and your mother,' and whoever reviles father or mother must surely die. But you say, if a man tells his father or his mother, 'Whatever you would have gained from me is Corban,' that is, given to God, then you no longer permit him to do anything for his father or mother, thus making void the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down. And many such things you do." And he called the people to him again and said to them, "Hear me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a person that by going into him can defile him. But the things that come out of a person are that what defiles him. Anyone who has ears to hear, let him hear." And when he had entered the house and left the people, his disciples asked him about the parable. And he said to them, "Then are you also without understanding? Do you not see that whatever goes into a person from outside cannot defile him, since it enters not his heart, but his stomach, and is expelled? Thus he declared all foods clean. And he said, what comes out of a person is what defiles him. For from within, out of the heart of man, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, evil, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person." And from there he arose and went away to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And he entered a house and did not want anyone to know, yet he could not be hidden. But immediately a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him, and came and fell down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. And he said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." And he said to her, "For this statement you may go your way. The demon has left your daughter." And she went home and found the child lying in bed, and the demon gone. Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went through Sidon to the Sea of Galilee, in the region of the Decapolis. And they brought to him a man who was deaf and had a speech impediment. And they begged him to lay his hand on him. And taking him aside from the crowd privately, he put his fingers into his ears, and after spitting, touched his tongue. And looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, "Ephphatha," that is, be opened. And his ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. And Jesus charged them to tell no one. But the more he charged them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. And they were astonished beyond measure, saying, "He has done all things well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak." Some thoughts for today. A young electrician is brought into the emergency room with severe burns, having been electrocuted. When his boss arrives, he asks why the young man didn't turn the electricity off before working on the wires, to which the boy replies, "Boss, I've seen you stand on one leg and work on wires 100 times, so I assumed it was safe." The boss retorts, "Son, didn't you know I have a wooden leg?" We're creatures of habit, and habit turns into tradition, and tradition turns into doctrine. Sometimes it does us well to examine how such traditions came into practice. There's an old tale of a young woman who boasts of her moist cake due to a secret of putting a pan of water in the oven when she baked that she had seen her mother do when she was growing up. However, this was turned into a laughing matter when the mother revealed that the purpose of the pan was to level the racks. The Pharisees of Jesus' day had the written and oral laws to guide them. The oral law, the Talmud, which filled in disputable matters with a certain degree of wisdom at first, became more important than the written law eventually. These, they believed, were handed down unbroken from Moses to Joshua to the judges, to the prophets, and now to them. The deeper meaning of the controversy that the Pharisees presented to Jesus are what Jesus attempts to teach. While the legalists of the day were intent on upholding tradition for tradition's sake when they inquired of this to Jesus. We read in verse 5, "And the Pharisees and scribes asked him, 'Why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with their bread with impure hands?'" It was no longer the law that they were concerned with. It was the tradition of the elders. The fallacy of the Pharisees' teaching is brought out when Jesus makes reference to the fact that the oral traditions made void the actual law that Moses delivered to them when they neglected the commandment to care for their parents in favor of donating their goods to the temple. Now he shows that the intent of their washing was of little value to the real spiritual lesson of what makes men impure. He now lays the foundation that would be built with Peter later in the book of Acts when the Gentiles are allowed in the church. A question of the day: what traditions are worthy of keeping and of letting go? And finally, a thought to meditate on this day. There are times to challenge tradition and times to honor them. Realizing that faith can be destroyed by each brings wisdom when deciding. And those are our thoughts for today, February 27th.